Welcome to WanaxTV. In this episode, we talk about the Heracleidae, the descendants of legendary hero Heracles. Before we begin, I'd like to thank to all of the Patreon members, all of the YouTube exclusive members, and of course, all of the channel subscribers. In fact, we have the newest member, Gregory Michael Nixon, so special thanks to him. And before we begin, I will also touch up on the current developments in the channel. As many of you already know, we have been working on the Etruscan civilization documentary for quite some time. It's going to be a 2-hour documentary on the complete history of the Etruscan civilization, from their origins, linguistic identity, the how other historical peoples view them, mainly the Greeks, the Romans, and we'll go through their whole history, starting from their gradual development, Villanovan culture, the conflicts with the Greeks, with the Romans, and eventual fall at the hands of the Roman Republic. We will also do another live, possibly tomorrow, and that topic will be the identity of the sea peoples. We will examine each and every one of the sea peoples group as they were listed by the Egyptians, and that's going to be a fun episode as well. We might do that tomorrow, we might do that the day after. We'll see how the original plan was for this current episode, the Heracleidae, to go live yesterday on Saturday, and for the sea peoples to be live today. We had to switch that up to push everything by a day at least. So we'll do Heracleidae right now, and the sea peoples are coming shortly. In the meantime, if you have any suggestions, anything you would like to see covered live on the channel, feel free to give your thoughts about it, to give us ideas, suggestions, and we might go with it. I will present segments shortly for this episode. We'll see how long this one is going to take us. It will not be as long as the Mycenae and Hittite conflicts that we did about 10 days ago. It was over 3 hours long, so I do not anticipate this episode to be that long at all. So we have first we'll go with the background, who Heracles was, or Hercules as we know him more prominently in Latin language, and subsequently in English. Many of, well, I'm not sure there's anybody who doesn't know who he was or who hasn't heard of him. The legendary Greek hero, perhaps the most legendary hero of all of the Greeks. We have him, we have his descendants, obviously, who came to be known as the Heracleidae, and the connections with the Dorians, because we do know that this topic is very, very much connected to the Dorian tribe, one of the main ancient Greek tribes of the classical times. Then we will go with the story, the actual story of the development and whereabouts of the Heracleidae during the late heroic age, at the time after the Trojan War, or contemporary to the Trojan War. We'll start with a generation earlier, which will cover Hyllus, the son of Heracles, and his two campaigns against Mycenae. We will cover his son Aristomachus and the third campaign against Mycenae, and that is followed by the fourth and final campaign led by Temenus and his two brothers. We have a lot of Temenus, which is basically division of the conquered Peloponnesian land between the Heracleidae and their descendants. And lastly, we will touch up on the legacy of the Heracleidae in the historical times. Many of the Dorian-speaking Greek city-states claimed Heracleid lineage, especially their rulers, their aristocratic class, the chief aristocrats. We had we had such case in many of the ancient Greek city-states. Inter says, "Good morning, Wanax and chat. Good morning to you." Well, we have the viewers are still coming in, so thank you for everybody joining us live. We'll see how this episode goes. I anticipate a little more than 1 hour, but once again, we'll see how it goes. Some of these stuff, if we go in deep, then it drags on, so you never know. The last episode was 3.5 hours pretty much, so that was a tough one, but it gathered the most views out of the live episode, so we'll see. All right, so with that being said, we will begin. Segment number one is the background on the Heracleidae, and we will touch on that first, starting with the legendary hero Heracles. Inter says the last one was a good one. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I knew it would be a long episode because of the such a huge topic that we covered. It was multiple topics blended into one. So I thought it would be about 2 hours. It ended up being 3.5 hours. So this one, my anticipation is about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. We'll see. But either way, so the background goes or starts with Heracles or Hercules, the most legendary hero in all of Greece, in all of Greek mythology. Most of the stories are he has individually he has by far the most stories told about him, and they continued to be made about him well into archaic and even classical times. We will not go into historicity of Heracles, and it's important to mention right now we're in Greek mythology. So, and Inter has joined the Equites, so he has become a member of the channel. Thank you very much for that. Another shout out to Interdictor. I mean, let's see if this is the full name. If it is not, I would like to get a full name. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much for joining the community, and for everybody who is thinking of accessing some exclusive content, you are free to join us on Patreon as a free member. You will get uh, some of the perks, such as some behind the scenes footage, some footage from the museums. Some of that has been sent to us recently by History with Sai. Shout out to History with Sai, a great friend of the channel. He was in LA a couple of weeks ago, and there was a featured exhibition on Bronze Age pylos. So he took some pictures, some videos, and sent it to me to share among WanaxTV members. So make sure to check that out. All right, so back to Heracles. So in Greek mythology, he was born likely in the city of Tiryns. There are some There are multiple versions of everything when it comes to Heracles and his stories in Greek mythology. So there's an alternative version about his birthplace being Thebes, if I'm correct. But chiefly we know him as being born in the city of Tiryns of mighty walls, a neighboring city to Mycenae, and historically one of the Bronze Age palatial centers of the Mycenaean Greece. But right now, we are not in the historical times. We are in Greek mythology, and as we know that classical Greeks made so many claims about their lineage and descent and so on, going back to the heroic times as they called them. And those times we know as Greek mythology. Yes, they correspond to the historical times of the late Bronze Age. Yes, that's correct. But by the time Greeks started writing about their mythology in the 8th century BC and moving on, they were several centuries, 4 or more centuries removed from their ancestors of the late Bronze Age. So they did not have access to historical information of what happened in the Mycenaean Greece beyond the oral tradition that was known to them after so many centuries. So whatever you encounter in Greek mythology, that does not equate to the historical times, that does not mean historicity, but in some cases there are some things that happen to be correct. In some cases they are hypotheses based on that could be associated with actual historical events and historical things. But once again, I want to make sure to differentiate Greek mythology from historicity. Guillermo, shout out to Guillermo. And oh, we have the devious Greek. What a great background. Thank you very much. So for many of the live episodes, I design custom backgrounds, especially for those episodes. This one is one of the basic animations that I have made that I sometimes use for other live episodes, but sometimes I design a special background animations for a particular episode. So it's all done by me, so thank you very much. All right, so going back to the heroic times of the dim past of the ancient Greeks, as those times were known to them, we have a great hero, Heracles, who was perhaps destined by Zeus to become a king of Mycenae at some point. Mycenae, the most powerful of all Greek kingdoms at the time. And the will of Zeus said the following: whoever of the descendants of Perseus is born first, the male successor at the time of the death of the previous king, which I believe was Sthenelus of Mycenae, will be new king of Mycenae, will be declared new king. However, unfortunately for Zeus and for Heracles, perhaps not perhaps not unfortunately to Heracles. So it goes two ways. Perhaps that's perhaps things turned out better for him than otherwise. But either way, Hera had different plans, and she made um, another princess, which was carrying a baby, but was not due to bear a child at the time. But she was caused by Hera to bear a child prematurely, and that child was Eurystheus, a cousin of Heracles, I believe a son of the previous king Sthenelus. So Eurystheus, or Eurystheus, as more more correct Greek pronunciation, I suppose. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong about Eurystheus or Eurystheus. He was born before Heracles was, and he was declared new king of Mycenae. And as children, and later as young adults, and later into their adulthood, King Eurystheus and Heracles were rivals. And Heracles usually proved to be superior among the two. However, he was not the king. Eurystheus was the king, and during one of the Heracles's episodes, he was condemned by the gods to, or by the um, Delphian oracle, after he had, I believe, an episode of rage, which was perpetrated by Hera, uh, if I'm correct. Either way, he he committed an atrocious act. He slain his family, and for him to get purified, he had to go and do 12 labors which were put in front of him by King Eurystheus. Originally, those were supposed to be 10 labors. He completes them, but Eurystheus felt that Heracles was helped by the gods. He was trying his best to give Heracles impossible labors, so he would fail and eventually die trying to accomplish them. Heracles, nonetheless, was able to successfully complete all of those deeds. We're not going to talk about them right now, but we know, many of us know, at least some of the deeds were, some of the labors. We had the Stympalian birds, the Nemean lion, the Cerberus in the underworld, and so on and so on. Heracles is successful, and he does many other accomplishments along the way. His legend grows and overshadows King Eurystheus, and thus Heracles is the greatest hero of Greece, even overshadowing the great king Eurystheus of Mycenae. The devious Greek says Evresteus. Did I say that correctly? Or every steps. I'm not sure. I suppose. Well, this is modern Greek, if I'm correct. So I was trying to do ancient Greek pronunciation, which I believe substitutes V for B. I believe vita is beta in ancient Greek. So that is what I was trying to go with. But either way, we'll just call him Eurystheus for convenience. So Eurystheus he still hates Heracles. He doesn't like him. He does not want to go against Heracles directly, but he is not happy that he's being overshadowed by the legend of Heracles. Either way, when Heracles passes away or joins the gods at the Mount Olympus, Eurystheus wants to exterminate Heracles' successors. Why? Because he's afraid that some of them might come back and claim the throne of Mycenae for themselves, based on what happened when Heracles and Eurystheus were born. And before that, obviously, we will touch on the Dorians. This is where the tribe of Dorians entered the picture. The Dorians at the time were inhabiting a part of Thessaly, I believe parts of northern Thessaly, and perhaps parts of central Greece, such as Doris, the mountainous, a small mountainous region of Doris. They spanned from that area, I believe, into Thessaly and into northern Thessaly, where King Aegimeus was ruler. So King Aegimeus is the king of Dorians in northern Thessaly, and he makes alliance with Heracles at some point during Heracles's adventures. Heracles aids the Dorians against the war in the war against the Lapids, who are also a tribe of northern Thessaly, legendary tribe, legendary people of Thessaly. Some other myths are connected to them as well, but we're not going to go into that right now. Heracles helps Dorians. They are victorious against Lapids, and as a reward, Heracles receives a third of Aegimeus' territory. He does not claim it. He leaves it to some of his successors or some of his sons to claim it afterwards. So now eventually Heracles passes away, and his children are known as the Heracleidae, meaning the children or the descendants of Heracles. Chief among those sons is Hyllus. Hyllus, he positions himself as the leader of the Heracleidae. He's the most powerful and the strongest among Heracles' sons, and he assumes control over 1/3 of Dorian territory in Thessaly. He was adopted by Aegimeus as his own son, and the Dorian tribes afterwards would be divided into three clans or three groups. Dimanes, after Dimas, one of the sons of Aegimeus. Pamphylians or Pamphilioi, after Pamphilus, another son of King Aegimeus. And Helians, after Hyllus, the son of Heracles, who was adopted and virtually raised by King Aegimeus of northern Thessaly. Guillermo says, I heard that Heracles had divine disease or epilepsy. Could that have been true? Well, maybe. I don't know. It's Greek mythology, so in mythology he had some kind of attack, and he ended a rage attack, or however it was described. I forgot the exact description in the source, but yeah, we have. Well, I do not want to pronounce this name correctly, so you will give me 1 second. We have and talk E, if I pronounce this correctly. He says, yes, that was modern, quote unquote. Yeah, I do remember that at some point, I believe in either late antiquity or early medieval period, Greeks had those phonetic shift in their language where a beta, which is the second letter of the Greek alphabet, came to be pronounced as vita, or I'm not a linguist, so I probably did not say this scientifically correctly, but either way, B or sound B became pronounced as V, softer, like V. B became V. So, so let's see the name Euboea, or as it was pronounced in ancient Greek, I believe, Euboea became Evia. So you see how B becomes V in those instances. So that's what happened, I believe, at some point in late antiquity when it comes to ancient Greek. So already in the ancient times, we had those shift, and the language just continued to develop or evolve through the medieval times and into the modern period. So today, the name would be pronounced Evristevs, I believe, according to the devious Greeks version here. But in ancient Greek, I think it should be closer to Euristeus. All right. Either way, Eurystheus does not look upon kindly towards the Heracleidae. He wants them hunted down. He wants them dead. He wants Hyllus, the son of Heracles, dead, and he takes action. Which brings us to the second segment, which is Hyllus. Hyllus is perhaps the eldest of the Heracleidae, or at least the eldest among those Heracleidae who succeeded Heracles in Thessaly among the Dorians. And he positions himself as the chief, as the most powerful among the Dorian leaders, even though ethnically he was not Dorian himself, because Heracles himself was not Dorian, he was technically Achaean. But Hyllus was raised, adopted by Aegimeus, the Dorian king, and subsequently became one of the leading Dorian chieftains. He was pursued together with his brothers and his companions by King Eurystheus, and eventually he found shelter in Athens. The Athenians accepted the Heracleidae, and as Eurystheus demanded extradition so he could destroy them, so to say, the Athenians refused, which led Eurystheus to attack Athens. He requested the extradition, he was turned down, and then he, together with his army and with his 5 sons, so he brought the Mycenaean royal army and all of the main generals, which were his own sons, with him to the campaign, to the siege of Athens. And he left the Atreid, or the Pelopidai, the two sons of Pelops, in charge of the Mycenaean court. And those are Atreus and Thyestes. We talked about them in one of the previous episodes. Feel free to check them out. The cursed house of Pelops. They had their own problems. We're not going to talk about those problems right now. Eurystheus leaves those 2 brothers in charge of the Mycenaean court. As he marches, he is preparing for a war, the siege of Athens, and he wants to destroy the Heracleidae, Hyllus and his friends, his brothers, his companions, and his allies, the Athenians. But the Heracleidae army, together with the Athenian allies, they sally out, they surprise Eurystheus and his men, and in the following battle, Eurystheus is killed, together with all 5 of his sons. The result is that the Mycenaean throne is now left vacant, and it is claimed by Atreus and Thyestes, the brothers who were left in charge of the Mycenaean court, and they have a little civil war between each other, fighting for the throne. And in the meantime, Hyllus, he marches on Peloponnese. He wants to use the opportunity that he just slain the king of Mycenae. He feels like he should be the new king. He feels like he should be the legitimate king of Mycenae, as his father Heracles was supposed to be. So he marches on Mycenae, but he is stopped as soon as he appeared on the strait of on the Isthmus of Corinth, I believe he was met with stiff resistance of the Peloponnesians, of the Mycenaeans, and their Peloponnesian allies. He's not able to proceed. He's not able to march on Mycenae. He's not able to seize on the opportunity, and he is beaten back. So the Heracleidae, they did defeat Eurystheus, but they were not as strong as they believed they were. They are not able to proceed and march on Mycenae and seize the throne. They are defeated, and Hyllus, he retreats to central and north. He retreats to the Dorian held territory in central and northern Greece at this point, as Atreus and his brother Thyestes fight it out in the battle for the throne of Mycenae. Eventually, Atreus wins, seizes the throne for himself, and he is the new Mycenaean king. He is the successor of Eurystheus. And mind you, he is not of Eurystheus's dynasty. Eurystheus, he is a descendant of Perseus, same as Heracles. That's why Hyllus believed that, well, that's why Hyllus did not consider Atreus as a legitimate king of Mycenae, because Atreus is a son of Pelops. He's of the Pelopid dynasty, the Pelopidae, and he is not a descendant of Perseus. And that becomes the claim of the Heracleidae from this point on. So their claim is that they are the last remaining descendants of Perseus, the legendary founder of Mycenae, and thus they should be holding the Mycenaean throne, not Atreus and his descendants, the most famous of which was Agamemnon, by the way. So after several years, Hyllus, he regroups and he decides he would march on Mycenae one more time. This time he's strengthened by his Dorian allies. He raises his Dorian contingents and he marches on Mycenae the second time, and this is at some point during the reign of King Atreus. The two armies meet at some place close around the Isthmus of Corinth once again, and it is decided that the battle would be settled by single combat. On one side, Hyllus steps up himself, the great hero himself in his own right, and son of the greatest hero, Heracles. And he challenges either Atreus or the greatest Mycenaean hero put up by the Mycenaeans. Atreus himself, he is the king of Mycenae. He is now the most powerful person in Greece de facto. He does not want to fight Hyllus himself, but somebody else steps up, and that is Acamas. Acamas, the king or ruler of Arcadia, he steps up to fight for his king, for the Wanax, for King Atreus, and he defeats and kills Hyllus in single combat, thus ending the second campaign of the Heracleidae and killing the chief Heracleidae of the time, Hyllus, the legendary son of Heracles. Now, Atreus remains undisputed ruler of Mycenae for a time. We have mentioned in some of the previous episodes what happened to him. He was eventually assassinated by Thyestes and his son Aegisthus. And the civil war would only continue to rage on in Mycenae until Orestes, until I believe, oh well, no, we are not yet at the time of Orestes. First, we have Agamemnon and his brother Menelaus. They defeat Thyestes and Aegisthus, and they reclaim the Mycenaean throne. Agamemnon becomes the king of Mycenae. Menelaus, his brother, becomes the king of Sparta. Then we have the Trojan War, and then we have the Achaean victory in Trojan War. Agamemnon comes home victorious, but he is also assassinated by Aegisthus and Agamemnon's own wife, Clytemnestra. She has her own motive, revenge for the death and sacrifice of hers and Agamemnon's daughter at the beginning of the Trojan War. She has a lover, Aegisthus, very, very complicated relationship there, a part of the curse of Pelops. And Agamemnon is slain, is assassinated also. Aegisthus is now the new king, but he rules only shortly, I believe 8 years, because Agamemnon's son Orestes, he is not done. He comes back, he defeats Aegisthus, he kills his own mother Clytemnestra, and he puts end on all internal Atreid and Pelopid wars. He is now the king of Mycenae, and this is a period after the Trojan War, the decades following the Trojan War. And at this time, there is no Heracleid attack. At this time, I believe Cleodius is the son of Hyllus, and he does not raise any significant force to attempt an attack on Orestes. Orestes is the undisputed king right now. He's very powerful. He rules both Sparta and Argos, as well as Mycenae and the rest of Argolis, by himself directly. He has all of Peloponnese subservient to him. And I believe he has a legendary trial in Athens where he is cleared of the wrongdoings. He is cleared of matricide. Actually, the atrocious fact that he killed his own mother as a revenge for her killing his father Agamemnon, which again was once again a revenge for Agamemnon sacrificing their daughter Clytemnestra. A very crazy situation. But either way, Orestes is able to rule with no significant interruptions, no significant internal conflicts, and he has a very long reign until he is eventually bitten by a snake in Arcadia at a very, very old age, and eventually he passes away in Arcadia. He is succeeded by his son Temenus, the final ruler of Mycenae. And now we go to the next segment, which happens during the reign of Temenus, and we have Aristomachus, who is the son of Cleodius and the grandson of Hyllus. Santiago says, were the single combats a real thing outside the myth? It sounds like a very diplomatic way to avoid a battle. I believe so. Single combats, they are very prominently featured in Greek mythology, yes. I believe single combats were also practiced in the early stages of the archaic times, where it was not a common practice for one army to completely annihilate another army, especially when it comes to wars between the Greek city-states. In wars between Sparta and Argos and some other early conflicts, it was a practice to have a selected army of a number of men fight. So the two armies would fight each other. Sometimes a single combat. Sometimes I believe there was a 300 champions against 300 champions. But yes, single combat appears to be historical concept. I believe that even in Hellenistic times, some of the battles were settled by single combat between generals of the Hellenistic era armies among the Greeks. So yes, I believe that single combat was a real thing, and I am not sure if the Hittite records perhaps mention some kind of single combat involving Ahiava. Do not quote me on this. I would have to go and do my due diligence and double check on this. But yes, single combats appear to be a real thing. Yeah. Did the Greeks use the phalanx formation during the Mycenaean age? They very likely did not use phalanx at this time. The the warfare was a little bit different. It consisted of light infantry. It consisted of heavy infantry. The Mycenaean heavy bronze armor, huge eight-figure shields, big spears. So those were the spearhead infantry units of the army. And of course, we have the chariots, who were the real heavy duty units of the war. So it was a chariot and heavy infantry warfare supported by lighter infantry, archers, slingers, and so on. Josh says, I'm grateful for the topic being talked about. Well, this is one of the topics that was always on the list. So if you have any other ideas, any other suggestions for the future topics, feel free to mention them, and I'll take them into consideration. The next topic for the next episode will be the identity of the sea peoples. We will take all of the sea peoples groups as they were mentioned in the Egyptian sources, and we'll go one by one, study them, analyze them, according to the amount of information that we have on them, of course. And we'll try to either, for some of them, we know their identity, we know what it was. For some of them, we have no idea, so we might speculate a little bit. So we'll see. It will be interesting. Is single combat a part of the Indo-Aryan culture, or is it universal? I do not know the answer for that question. Even for the Indo-Aryan culture, I can only speak of the Hellenic ancient times and Bronze Age. And when it comes to Bronze Age, I would have to, perhaps a single combat could be an episode on itself at some point. I have not done heavy research or significant research on the concept on single combat to be able to answer right now. But if we were to do a single combat episode, that's a very interesting episode. We could do it actually. Now you gave me an idea. We can dive into that at that time. I'd like to hear about the ancient locations of Jason or Jason and the Argonauts. That's also an interesting topic, a big topic for an episode. One of the chief locations, perhaps the chief location, the location of the Golden Fleece, was the region of the land of Chalkis, which roughly corresponds, it corresponds to the area of the far eastern coast on the edge of the Black Sea. I believe today's territory of Georgia and the surrounding states, I believe. But if we are talking about the whole journey, obviously, which starts in Greece, then we would have to map it out. I would like to hear about any Bronze Age Greek links to the European cultures of the Danube, for example, Vincha. Well, once again, a topic that requires a separate episode, the Vincha culture. That's a Neolithic era culture, so we might have to go back to the Neolithic times for some of these episodes. If you can find enough stuff about the single combat, it would be a great episode. Yes, well, for sure. I believe it's a great topic for the episode. It will be very interesting. And perhaps I'm not able to do it this week. I would need some time to do my research. But I would like to do single combat for sure. So let's put that on the list, actually. Let's put single combat on the list, and we'll talk about single combat starting from the Bronze Age and going into the classical times and even Hellenistic times. That's we're putting single combat on the list. Yeah, the single combat topic sounds good. Yeah, perfect, perfect. We'll do single combat in one of the next live episodes. All right, so now we go back to Aristomachus, son of Cleodius, the grandson of Hyllus, and this is now the time of the heavy Mycenaean decline. After the reign of Orestes, he's succeeded by Temenus. And if we were to put dates that historical dates that correspond these still mythological events, we would be talking about the late 11th about the late 12th century BC. We would be talking about 1120 to, let's say, 1100 BC, so the end of the 12th century BC, the same century where we date the Trojan War to. The Trojan War would be the beginning of the 12th century, and this period that we're talking about right now, the fall of Mycenae and the fall of the last Mycenaean dynasty, would correspond to the very end of that same century. Which does not mean that when we talk about history and historicity of these events, that these events indeed happened this way. This is what we learn in the 8th and the subsequent centuries BC when the Greek alphabet had been developed. And between 1200 BC and 800 BC, we virtually have no written records. Linear B, the Mycenaean writing script, goes out of use in the earlier part of the 12th century, and only around 800 BC the Greeks developed their new writing system, which is the Greek alphabet. In the meantime, they have a very developed oral tradition, but when it comes to oral tradition, one thing that we do know about it is that it goes from generation to generation to generation to generation, and the story gets orally transmitted, and inevitably it changes over time. Some things are forgotten, some things are added, some things are made up, and after 4 centuries of that, or between 4 and 5 centuries of that, what we have as a result is Greek mythology, the story of the Trojan War, the story of the Trojan War aftermath, the Heracleidae invasions, and the subsequent fall of Mycenae, which is what we're talking right now. But Mycenae has not fallen just yet. So Aristomachus, he summons his own contingents, he gathers his troops, his Dorians, and he consults the Delphian oracle. And the Delphian oracle tells him about a narrow passage that he needs to cross for him to be able to conquer Mycenae. And the most obvious narrow passage is the Isthmus of Corinth. So the army of Aristomachus goes to the Isthmus of Corinth, and they attempt the third invasion. They are met by King Temenus of Mycenae, and eventually they are not successful. Temenus is victorious, and unfortunately for the Heracleidae, Aristomachus is killed on the field of battle. Another failed invasion, another Heraclid leader slain at the hands of the Mycenaeans. Josh says, life is short and difficult in the era being discussed. Well, that's true. That's true. Pelasgian Skeleton has appeared in the chat. Welcome to Pelasgian Skeleton. Nice to have you here. He's back. Mycenaeans and Minoans were Greek. That's what he says. We have Leo Zaz. Have you ever planned a video about the story of the Argonauts? Yes, I have. I have planned that video, and the only issue with that is that it would not be a short video, because if we were to cover the whole story of the Jason and the Argonauts, it would have to be either a series of 4 or 5 videos or one big episode which lasts for over an hour. So we'll see what we can do about it. It will probably not happen in 2025. If it does happen, it will likely be in the format of the live episode like we're doing right now. But the regular episode, not sure about 2025, because we have only a little over 2 months left in this year. And the chief thing that we're working on is the complete history of the Etruscan civilization, which should be out either at the end of this month or at some point next month. We'll see how fast we are progressing on this. Santiago says, speaking of topics, I find it interesting that the most popular video on the channel is the one about the Pelasgians. Perhaps origins are always appealing, besides the fact that the video is great. Thank you very much for that. So yes, it's true. The most popular video on WanaxTV is the video about the Pelasgians, the legendary pre-Greek slash proto-Greek slash semi-Greek inhabitants of Greece, dating back likely to the Neolithic times. There are so many different, sometimes contradictory sources, even among the ancient Greeks when it comes to Pelasgians, and they are appear to be kind of mysterious, very appealing topic, I agree. And I was thinking that one of the videos for next year could be the complete mythology of the Pelasgians. So for us to go through all of the myths involving Pelasgians, from the autochthonous king Pelasgus. There were multiple individuals named Pelasgus in Greek mythology. To go through them, their participation in the Trojan War, their participation in many of the founding myths of many of the city-states of ancient Greeks. So we'll see. We'll see. That will require a lot of work for sure. It says, "Oh, okay, cool. The Argonauts can wait then." Um, we'll try to accommodate both. We'll see. We'll see. We'll listen to what everybody says, I suppose, and then we'll make a decision based on that and go from there. Valerian in the chat says, there are some people who say that with the help of AI, the Minoan tablets of Linear A could be translated. Do you think this could be possible? If so, it would give us a lot of information. I think it's potentially possible. I do not think that it is absolutely impossible to decipher linear A. I think we have a situation of the lack of material. There are not too many that we're not working with too many of the tablets. I forgot what the exact number was, but it's several times less than the amount of linear B records which we have. But that's not the chief thing. I think that eventually, some way, somehow, we will be able to decipher, probably with the help of AI. That's what I think, but we'll see. We'll see. I am not a linguist. I'm not an expert in the field. I just have high hopes that we might be able to do that. All right, so back to the Heracleidae. Aristomachus is killed in battle, and the campaign fails, which brings us to the second Heraclid campaign of the Temenus's reign in Mycenae, but overall the fourth and the final Heraclid campaign against Mycenae. Josh says, I already thought that both linear alphabets were already deciphered. Well, they are linear scripts, not linear alphabets. So alphabet is a different style of script, but yeah, I know what you mean. So only linear B is deciphered. Linear A, I believe that we were able to figure out some of the signs, I believe, for a total sum at the end of the text, which sums the amounts of I believe, the goods or whatever was being accounted for in the tablets. So very minor things were able, but we were not able to decipher the language itself. So 95% of the text on every tablet is still unknown from what I remember. Michael Pack says, this channel has gotten really, really good. It's exciting to be here with all of you. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Michael. So, do you say that because of this live format or in general? I think in general we were able to increase the quality of production, and I'm looking for more feedback about these live episodes, because the reason we started these live episodes is because I was unable to produce regular episodes so fast, because we're working on a 2-hour documentary which eats a lot of the time that I would use to produce those 10, 15, 20-minute videos. And if I am producing those videos every week or every other week, then I'm not able to proceed with the Etruscan documentary. So I sacrificed the smaller videos for until the Etruscan documentary is done. And when that's done, we will resume the normal videos and we will continue these live episodes. Michael says, total package, everything. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Leo Zez says, your work is great and has made me read old Greek epics. Well, yeah, I mean, some of the epics are unfortunately lost, but the Iliad, the Odyssey, that's gold. Pelasgian Skeleton says, I am of the belief that Bronze Age Greek is the closest language to Proto-Indo-European, and the Disfilio tablet dated to 5200 BC is actually an ancient form of Greek. And gotta go get a snack though. Okay, okay, Pelasgian skeleton. Josh, thank you very much for me being a great communicator. We have Michael Pack says excited for the Etruscan documentary, and we have History with Sai joining us live. Shout out to History with Sai. He says these live streams are great. Thank you very much. Um, it's great to have History with Sai here. This is the second time we have him live on the channel here in the comments. Obviously, this is a great friend of this channel, and probably if we were to pick one person that's the most instrumental for the development of the channel, that would be History with Sai, because he's been with the channel since day one, and many of you already know the story with History with Sai. Please check out his channel. I'm pretty sure that 90% of the people here, at the very least, are already History with Sai subscribers. And this channel has gotten many viewers from History with Sai. So thank you, Sai. Josh, Wanax, you encourage us to learn on our own as well. Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, you can whatever topic is of interest to you, you can have your own means and then get your own source. I mean, get some get your own sources basically, and read them and make your own conclusions. That's that's basically what I was doing when I created when I was working on the Mycenaean Hittite conflicts video. I took all of those Hittite texts, put them in chronological order, and went one by one until I pieced the story together for the video. News Drifter has, yeah, History with Sai is great. Estate Care, History with Sai is awesome. Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. So we are already past 1 hour. Okay, what time is it? It's almost 8 p.m. here on the East Coast, which means it's way past midnight in Europe and especially in Greece. So if you are from Greece, from Cyprus, from anywhere else in Europe, thank you very much for staying at such inconvenient time to watch this. And obviously, big thanks to everybody for being here. Which brings us to the return of the Heracleidae. We are still at the reign of Temenus in Mycenae. We are at the tail end of the Mycenaean Greece era. And we are now at the time of the sons of Aristomachus. His three sons are Temenus, Cresphontes, and Aristodemus. Temenus being the eldest, likely the leader of the coalition, and he assembles the army once again. He is aided by the Dorian contingents. He is also aided by the Aetolians, led by Oxylus, as instructed by the Delphian oracle upon consultation by the Heracleidae. And the coalition is also aided by the Thebans. King Autesian of Thebes also marches with his own companions and joins the expedition. So the Heracleidae, Temenus and his brothers, they are very concerned now. They know that Aristomachus before them, their father, had consulted the oracle. he was told to find a narrow passage and attack Mycenae from there, but he was killed at the Isthmus of Corinth. So they are very concerned. They go back to Delphi. They consult the oracle again. They tell the oracle about a previous consultation of Aristomachus, and they complain that when he listened to the Delphian oracle, he ended up dead, and his campaign failed. But the oracle says that by narrow passage, the oracle did not mean the Isthmus of Corinth. There's another narrow passage that they should be looking at. And that narrow passage is the northern tip of Peloponnese, the Straits of Rhion, between Rhion and Anti-Rhion, close to Naupactus on the continental side, on the Aetolian side. And now the Heracleidae they go to Naupactus. They recruit Oxylus of Aetolia to help them as instructed by the oracle. I believe that the prophecy says that upon seeing a man with 3 eyes, he should be added to the cause. And when Oxylus was seen by the Heracleidae, I believe that he had a cattle with him with only 1 eye, or whatever the story was, and that was interpreted as quote unquote a man with 3 eyes. So he was recruited into the army, Oxylus of Aetolia, and also Autesian, the king of Thebes. So now we are having a very strong coalition, perhaps finally stronger than the Mycenaean army itself. Michael says, I wish I could remember how I found your channel, but it seems like it was very early. You had made only 10 videos. I said then, I'll say it again, this is my favorite channel, thanks to Sai. I remember those old videos. I'd like to think we improved a lot since those times. Those early videos are still available, although the quality is just nothing close that it is right now, but you're free to watch them. Or maybe it was Epimetheus that led me here. Can't remember. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. If you have any ideas for it doesn't have to be the next video, but some of the future videos, please bring it on. Josh says it's never the oracles' fault. They just talked cryptically. Yeah, that's true. That's true. We had the same story, I believe, when the king of Lydia, Croesus, was having a war against Cyrus of the Persian Empire, where he was convinced that the empire would fall, and he did not realize that the empire was his own kingdom that was about to fall. That's one of the first things that comes to my mind. But yeah, the oracles are notorious for being very cryptic in their interpretations of the divine will. So they always leave space for them to still be right, even if you listen to them and fail, they'll find a way to tell you that you did something wrong. What they said was still correct. Flashlight says, I'm pretty sure Sai sent me here. Well, I think Sai has sent a lot of people here throughout the years. Either way, we go back to Temenus and his 2 brothers, Cresphontes and Aristodemus. They do cross the Straits of Rhion. They enter northern Peloponnese, and this is where they meet the Mycenaean army. The great battle takes place, and King Temenus of Mycenae is defeated and killed in battle. The Mycenaean army is destroyed, and the path for the Heracleidae to claim Peloponnese for themselves, it's finally free. Also important is that Aristodemus, one of the brothers, is killed during the war. I believe that he's killed in an ambush while crossing through Arcadia, if I'm correct. Or there are two versions of the story. Another version is that he was struck by lightning for some reason, for slaying an Arcadian, a Carnanian soothsayer, if I'm correct. He was, in one version, he was slain by the gods as punishment. In another version, he was killed in ambush in Arcadia during the war. But he is succeeded by his two sons, his twin sons, Eurysthenes and Procles, who would be carrying his legacy moving forward. And as a result of the war, we have division of the territory between the Heracleidae, known as the lot of Temenus, which is the next segment. The lot of Temenus, the famed division of the territories by the Heracleidae. The Mycenaean army is no more. The Achaeans no longer control Peloponnese. It's Heracleidae and their Dorian contingents. Their army is mainly made of Dorians plus some allies, but we do know that Heracleidae are by this time de facto the Dorian leaders. The skeleton of their army and the main contingents of their army are Dorians, because they are successors of Hyllus, who himself was one of the Dorian leaders. Despite not being Dorian by blood, he was adopted by a Dorian king into his own family, and he became one of the Dorian leaders together with Aegimus's two sons. And due to this, the historical Dorian city-states and Dorian aristocratic families across ancient Greece would always claim Heracleid lineage, they would claim association with Heracles, they would claim association with the Heracleidae, and they held both Heracles and his descendants in high regard. The lot of Temenus happens between the three sons of Aristomachus, the three conquerors of Peloponnese, Temenus himself, and his two, well, not his two brothers because Aristodemus is dead, but himself and on one side, Cresphontes on another side, and the third party was two twin brothers, Eurysthenes and Procles, who I believe were represented by a regent at this time. And we do have Oxylus of Aetolia, the man who assisted the invasion, one of the chief allies. The lot of Temenus divides the territories in the following way. Temenus receives Argos, which at the time is the premium prize. Obviously, Sparta at the time is in Laconia, and it is a minor, very minor polity at the time. I believe it was Bronze Age Sparta was nowhere near Mycenae, nowhere near Tiryns, nowhere near even Argos in Argolis, nowhere near Pylos in Messenia. It was a smaller town, smaller outpost, which was likely subservient directly to Mycenae. But either way, Temenus, the eldest brother, receives Argos, Cresphontes receives Messenia, and twin brothers Eurysthenes and Procles receive Laconia. When it comes to Oxylus, who is not a Heracleidae, but a chieftain from Aetolia, an ally of the Heracleidae, he receives Elis. And I believe that is contested at some point. He is forced to defeat a Dorian rival, and he is also forced to accept an Achaean prince, I believe, according to the prophecy, to found the settlements in the region of Elis together. So, but he's not as relevant to the story as the three brothers, or the two brothers and the descendants of the third brother. Arcadia, the mountainous region of Arcadia in central Peloponnese, remains unconquered. That is important to notice. Arcadians did not oppose the Dorian settlement militarily, I believe, and they tried to stay as neutral as they can as to avoid being invaded themselves, although they did manage to be the location where one of the Heracleidae was killed during the war. As we know, Aristodemus was killed in Arcadia. Achaeans, at one point, the chief tribe of all of Greece, but the chief tribe of Peloponnese, their core region, they are no longer in charge of Peloponnese. They migrate away. We do know that one of the migration one of the migrations was led by Cometes, a son of Temenus who sailed for Asia. Not much is known about him afterwards. We do know about Penthilus, the brother of Temenus, or the half brother of Temenus, who sailed for Asia Minor, and his own descendants, chiefly Gras, who was the king in Aiolis in northwestern Anatolia and the island of Lesbos. So the Achaeans, they spread out, they settle all different regions, but the chief regions that they settle is northern Peloponnese, known as Aegialus at that time, but from that point on known as Achaia, the classical Greek region of Achaia. And of course, the lot of Temenus would also be a source of many territorial disputes in the historical times, because Temenus, when he received Argos, he did not receive only the city of Argos, he received all of Argolis, he received the coastal area spanning all the way south into Laconia and the island of Cythera as well. So those areas, Kineria and the southern areas, would be heavily disputed and fought over between Sparta and Argos in archaic and even in the classical times. And finally, we have the last segment of the episode, which is the Heracleid legacy. Josh says, who did the video with the Assassin's Creed depiction of ancient Greece? I'm not sure. Well, hopefully somebody in chat can answer this. I'm not sure. What do you mean by that? Do you mean uh, a some channel that did a video on the description of Greece based on Assassin's Creed, or I'm not sure. So the Heraclid legacy, now we finally enter the historical times, and we have a very interesting situation, and that's that the Heraclid lineage is claimed by numerous historical rulers and numerous aristocratic families across classical Greece, and chiefly The best known case that we have is perhaps Sparta, perhaps Argos and Macedon, but chiefly Sparta. They were the driving force between the Heraclid lineage and in general the Dorian identity in the classical times. When it comes to Argos, the lineage of Temenus, the lineage of Heracles went through Temenus and his own descendants. I believe the final king of Argos was either Meltas or somebody in. Perhaps Meltas is recorded as one of the final rulers, where he, by that time, the power of a king, of a monarch in Argos was severely limited by aristocracy and the people. And upon attempting to violently seize power for himself, one of the final Heraclid kings of Argos was executed by the Argive people. In Corinth, we also have at first kings of Heraclid lineage, and then we have aristocratic family, the Bacchidae, I believe, who seized power from the rulers and ruled until, I believe, 7th or 8th century BC. We could quickly check this. When it comes to Corinth, so yes, the Bacchidae were the ruling aristocratic family in Corinth in the 8th and 7th centuries BC. That's correct. Then we have Mycenae. There, we also had a Heraclid dynasty, but that dynasty was not pro-Dorian. That dynasty quickly turned back towards Achaean identity, and the Dorians were marginalized in Messenia, which was a source of many problems between Messenia and Sparta, led to Messenian wars and subsequent and eventual subjugation of Messenia under the Spartan rule. We also have Sicyon. We have the kingdom of Macedon, which is one of the chief polities of classical times, especially Hellenistic times, by the time of Philip II and his son Alexander in the classical period, and Hellenistic period after Alexander. Macedon was perhaps the chief polity in Greece, and the ruling house of Macedon was the house of the Argive house, the Argeads. They were descendants of Caranus, who himself is one of the sons or descendants of Temenus, the king of Argos. So they also claimed Dorian and Heraclid lineage. Alexander himself was coming from a Heraclidae branch. And I believe the final ruler, the final Heraclidae that ruled Macedon was Alexander the Great's son, Alexander IV, who was unfortunately assassinated not long after the post-Alexander Diadochi wars have broke across the ancient world, basically, not only ancient Greece, but now we're talking about much larger area. However, the very last Heraclid ruler was in Sparta. Sparta was a traditional society, very strict, very conservative, very militaristic, and as they faded away in relevance and power, in influence in the Greek world during the Hellenistic times, they still hanged on and held many of their ancient traditions. They were very slow in evolving, and their last recorded king was still a Heraclid, I believe. It was not the Aegeid dynasty, but the Europontid dynasty, I believe. And he is recorded as Laconicus or Laconius of Sparta. He ruled for a brief period in 192 BC, I believe, after the wars against Nabis, when Nabis was assassinated by the Aetolians. The Spartans gathered and they decimated the Aetolian forces. They put Laconicus, as he was recorded by the Romans, on the throne, but that might be um, corruption of the name Laconius, so we do not know that for sure, but he was very likely a boy and he ruled for a very brief period of time before Sparta now declined, weakened. Sparta was submerged into the Achaean League. The Achaean League would be eventually defeated several decades later by the Romans, the rising Roman Republic, and thus the period of the Roman Greece started. And this is where we conclude this Heracleid episode. What does the chat says? It says, how can they prove there was no return of the Heracleidae? Vin Russo says. I'm not sure if there is a consensus of whether there was or where there was not a return of the Heracleidae. I believe that the early modern theory of the quote-unquote Dorian invasion was largely disproved in a sense that there was no large-scale Dorian migration and invasion of the late or the end of the Bronze Age era Greece. But these information are very, very limited due to lack of written records. Or Vinrusus says, or prove there was no Dorian invasion. Well, the Heracleids themselves were not Dorians, and they were aided by Dorians. They, I believe, ruled over or were allied by the Dorians, and the Dorians were the driving force behind the Heracleid power and influence. At the time, they were consolidating themselves in Peloponnese. But it did not happen everywhere. In Mycenae, we have the Heracleid kings very quickly abandoning the Dorian cause and going back to the Achaean lineage, their Achaean roots, and embracing the Achaean identity and really creating, putting Dorians in a position of being second-class citizens, very similar to what the Spartans did in Sparta when they created the class of the Perioikoi, or the so-called dwellers around, who were free men, but they were not Dorian, and thus they did not hold any political power. That's what the Messenian kings did in Messenia, and Dorians of Messenia looked at Sparta for help. There was a long period of disputes and tensions and skirmishes between Sparta and Messenia before the First Messenian War broke out. But back to the Dorian invasion question. There are no records of a large-scale invasion because here we're talking about a heavily declined Mycenae, which is, I believe, by 11, if we're talking historically, what is proven by archaeological records, by 1100 BC, Mycenae was a shadow of itself. It suffered destruction in the earlier part of the century. after Pylos was completely destroyed, Mycenae was sacked as well, and it never recovered to the former glory. It continued to decline, which resulted in neighboring Tiryns to serve as a refuge center for many of the Mycenaean population. I believe Tiryns was the chief Mycenaean settlement in the final Mycenaean period between 12 and 1100 BC, or between 1200 and 1050 BC. But yes, with this being said, I would like to thank to everybody for joining us. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for the future news and updates on the upcoming content. We will come back shortly with the identity of the sea peoples. That's what we have planned for the next episode. That might be on tomorrow or perhaps Tuesday. We'll see. One of these days in the earlier part of the week. And as for the future episodes, feel free to come up with your own suggestion or idea. So we'll see. We'll see. Once again, thank you very much and see you again soon.